So let me just share with you the genesis for the good job strategy. So I am as Francisco mentioned, I am an operations management professor, and I started doing my research in the retail industry more than 20 years ago. And my focus at the time was on managing product availability. So getting the right product to the right store at the right time. And I joined a group of researchers from Harvard and from Wharton. And we were working with companies to optimize their profits and using a lot of data, a lot of analysis. And one of the problems that we learned during that time was that although companies' supply chains actually got the right product to the right store at the right time, oftentimes the products were either in the back rooms or misplaced in locations where customers couldn't find them. And so many customers ended up experiencing a stock out for a product that's actually there in the store. Another problem that we found was that retailers would have plans for promotions, but the compliance was really low. Sometimes the promotions were not carried out at all, and oftentimes they were not carried out on time. Shrink was another issue. We thought that retailers had great data, only to find out that most of the data that they had when it comes to inventory, for example, were inaccurate data. So this graph on the right represents data from a large retailer that we work with. And what you show here on the x-axis is absolute error. And that error represents the discrepancy between what the company's information technology system, data system said about what they had in stock for a particular item versus what they actually had in stock. So if they were selling these pens, my system says I have 3 units of this pen, but in reality, I only have 2. That means the discrepancy is 1. So what you see here is that 65% of the products had inaccurate data, and only 35% had accurate data. So early on, and these are some of the problems related to merchandising, inventory, and misplaced products, data inaccuracy, shrink, pricing errors, etc. But there were so many other service-related problems in retail stores too. There were long lines, dirty stores, dirty bathrooms, unfriendly, unhelpful, or unavailable associates, order inaccuracies, especially for those retailers that have prepared food in their stores, and lack of product and process knowledge. So I'm going to pause here for a second, and I'm going to ask you quickly, these problems that I'm describing here that I have seen in the retailers in the United States largely, do you have them in your stores, or are these completely operating in a different universe?
They are exactly the same. Yeah, we see exactly the same problems here with retailers. Probably the merchandise ones a bit more exaggerated because of we're a bit behind in the implementation of technology, but yeah, the exact same problem.
Okay, great. So I just want to make sure everything that we have here resonates with you as well. And so early in my research, I saw these problems, and these problems were very expensive. The poor execution was very expensive. What are the costs? Well, some of the costs have to do with lower sales, and these are actually the highest cost of poor execution, and lower sales from stockouts now, but also lower sales from poor merchandising decisions in the future, because and lost customer goodwill. And these problems also had higher costs, higher inventory costs, more shrink, more returns, and low labor productivity and overtime. So the obvious question at the time was, why do these problems happen all the time? Why do these expensive problems happen all the time? And this is when, as an operations person, I am at the human people side of retail, because in almost every company that I analyzed as a researcher, and now our Good Jobs Institute work in the last 6 years or so, we find that stores that have more turnover have more of these problems. Stores that have more understaffing have more of these problems. Stores that don't have great people, have more of these problems. And in fact, many retailers operate in a vicious cycle. And this vicious cycle starts with the mentality that, and this is a mentality not just in retail, but in almost every frontline industry, the mentality is that, people, labor is a cost, right? When you look at your income statement, labor after cost of goods sold represents the highest cost. Labor is a cost, and we should focus on minimizing that cost. And when people are seen as just a cost to be minimized, then unit managers are put under tremendous pressure to be able to minimize those costs. One, the wages are low, companies pay market, whatever others are paying. But two, unit managers are constantly measured on how well they are doing with payroll as a percentage of sales. So they're thinking about, how do I reduce that payroll? How do I reduce that payroll? And that, of course, leads to poor execution. Poor execution leads to low sales and profits. And when sales are lower, of course, labor budgets shrink, and then this vicious cycle continues. And just as an example, employee turnover is one of the easiest way to estimate the low investment in people. And every company that we work with, we see this relationship between employee turnover and other metrics. For example, this comes from a convenience store chain that we work with, and we divided the employee turnover into quartiles. So quartile 1 has the lowest employee turnover at 70%. This was during the pandemic, so the turnover might be more than typical. And quartile 4 is the worst quartile in terms of turnover. And you see how much more shrink that worst quartile has, right? 170% more shrink than the best quartile has in terms of employee turnover. So huge differences across different stores. And it's not just when it comes to shrink, we see this with lots of other metrics, including customer related metrics. So this comes from another retailer that has lower turnover than the convenience store chain that I just shared with you. And again, we're looking at different quartiles. And what you see here is we're looking at NPS, Net Promoter Score. It's just, I imagine some of you are using that score in your organizations too, but it's a measure of customer loyalty. And what we see here is, again, the top quartile, quartile 1 with the lowest turnover, has higher NPS score, much higher, 10 percentage point higher NPS score than the bottom quartile that has 124% employee turnover at 45. So these are, the effect of turnover on poor execution, customer satisfaction. Those are expensive, but also turnover itself is expensive. Many companies we work with, we end up looking at their employee turnover and employee turnover for their full-time employees, part-time employees, assistant managers, store managers, and then we estimate the cost of each person leaving. And what we find is that those costs could range from 2% of revenue to 9% of revenue, depending different environments. And these might lead to 10% of your overall payroll costs to almost 25% of your payroll costs. So even the direct cost of turnover tend to be significant. Of course, one of the things that we have found in our work with companies is when companies operate with high turnover, there are so many other things that they can't do. And here I'm going to ask you again, when your stores have high turnover, so people are coming and going all the time, when you have attendance problems that goes hand in hand with employee turnover, what are some of the things that you can't do at your stores? Yes, Raul.
I think that in Mexico, one of the problems, I'm not an expert on the retail industry, to be honest, but I have some friends working on that area. And one of the problems they have told me for that turnover is the salary. We have a problem with low salaries for especially for, I don't know how to call it in English, but for the let's say for the store employees, not for the
Frontline
managers. Maybe the managers have a better salary, have better income in overall, but for the people that are working in the floor, in the bay, in the store, the salaries are low. So one of the problems they have is that, and that is a big trouble because it's not easy to increase salaries just as it is. So definitely stores need to focus on other strategies to improve the workers morale. And in my experience, I used to do some consulting for HEB for one of the important retailers here in Mexico, in northern Mexico, especially. And what they were trying to do was focusing on improving the relationship between the managers and the store people and the store employees. They were mostly sure that one of the big problems also was the lack of interaction.
Before we get into solutions, sorry to interrupt you. Before we get
Yes.
into solutions, can I just ask for others who work in retail
Sure.
to what are some of the other things? And I'll get to your low pay, low salary. I'll focus specifically on that because we have worked with dozens of companies now.
Yeah.
And in the frontline sectors, what we have found is exactly what you described. Low pay, and in the United States, unstable schedules and few career paths to move up to a higher paid position tend to be the biggest drivers of employee turnover. What we have also found was that pay is so important for workers. Nothing else compensates for pay. So if you are making very little money, so you can't put food on the table, you don't have agency in your life, you can't take care of your family, you have no control, then you always, if you find something that is, a little bit higher paid, then the tendency is to switch. And we'll get to how to be able to do that using the good job strategy. But let me ask, for those of you who are managing retail, what are some of the things that you can't do when operating with turnover? Let's see, I'll mention what we have seen from other companies then. What we have seen is that when companies operate with high employee turnover, then they have difficulty hiring the right person and training them because the store managers are constantly fighting fires. When they don't hire the right person or train them well, then they end up not empowering the frontline employees to make decisions because they don't trust them. And we also found that when you operate with high turnover, it's very difficult to have consistently good managers because there is not a great pipeline of workers and who can become a manager, and many of the managers are burnt out because they're constantly dealing with customer service problems, employee problems, and operational problems. And we also found that when companies operate with high turnover, it's really hard to have a high expectation system. People come and go all the time, so it's hard to set high standards and expect people to be able to reach those high standards. And all of these things that companies can't do make it very difficult for them to create a differentiated customer experience. And also adapt to changes in market conditions. So as we work with companies and we look at, what are the big costs of vicious cycle, we find that the turnover cost, the direct employee turnover costs, are actually the smallest cost. But the bigger costs, or those financial operational execution costs, and even the biggest ones, are the competitive costs, because you can't differentiate yourself from your competitors if you don't have a motivated, engaged workforce, and you can't adapt to changes in labor markets, changes in technologies, changes in customer needs. So this is what we have seen, and what I will share with you, and this is the exciting part of the good job strategy, is that this vicious cycle is not inevitable. There are companies that I researched for my first book. Costco, one of the world's largest retailers, is a wholesale club. Quick Trip It's a convenience store chain with gas stations. It's like 7-Eleven, and Mercadona is Spain's largest retailer. And when you look at these companies and what their employee turnover is, they're not like 10%, 15% lower than their industry. They are a fraction of their industry. Quick Trip, I studied them in 2010, and these numbers have changed since then. But when I studied them, their full-time employee turnover was 13% compared to 109% in the convenience store chain industry. As of 2019, the numbers were 20% for Quick Trip and still 100% for the C-store average. For Costco, frontline employee turnover is 17%. And for people who have been there for more than a year, it's 6%. For Mercadona, the Spanish supermarket chain, and it's Spain's largest supermarket chain, employee turnover is less than 4%. So these companies, imagine, what you can do when you have such low employee turnover. And related to turnover, of course, the tenure of these employees are so much longer as well. And when you look at the pay that these companies pay their workers, their frontline workers, again, the pay is not 5%, 10% more than their competitors. It's almost double what the competitors are paying. So at Costco, when the typical retail sales worker was making $14 an hour, a typical Costco worker was making more than $25 an hour. It's a huge difference. At Quick Trip, if you get hired right now in Kansas City for a full-time job, you can make $50,000 a year. So huge pay investments. And I'm going to come to Gabrielle now what you say, because how can they afford higher pay, right? These are settings with very low profit margins. How can they pay so much more and offer their customers the lowest prices and make a ton of money? And when I analyze these companies and ask this question, how do they do it? I found that on the one hand, they invested so heavily in their employees. And that investment was not just in pay, but also pay progression, right? So as you spend more time with the company, you make a lot more money. That investment was also 100% internal promotion. So if you look at a Quick Trip store manager, that store manager was not hired as a store manager. That person was hired either as a relief manager or a part-time clerk, and they moved up in the organization. Same with Quick Trip, same with Costco, same with Mercadona. So very heavy investment in people, which also is high expectations. But then these companies make a set of operational choices that by design increase the productivity and contribution of the people to make the pay investment worthy. And in particular, they made 4 operational choices. And I will say the operational choices that I'm going to describe now and the investment in people, they represent a system together. They work very well together, and they both enable and require each other. So we'll spend some time on this slide. And if you have any questions about any of these choices, please feel free to raise your hands and ask me questions. But these are the 4 big choices that these companies make. First, focus and simplify. So a typical retailer I had seen in my research before studying Mercadona and Costco and Trader Joe's and Quick Trip, in a typical environment, the tendency was to increase sales by adding to the product line, by adding promotions, by adding more hours, by adding as much as possible, sometimes even at the expense of value proposition. And a typical company, in addition to adding all the time, functions at the headquarters. So this could be merchandising, this could be logistics, this could be asset control, this could be HR, this could be, a bunch of different functions in the home office, in the headquarters. They make so many siloed decisions and add so much to the workload in the store. So they add new tools, they add new pilots, they add new products, they add new services. And in the operating environment, that environment is really complex now. So that's the typical that we see over and over again. When you look at the companies that adopt a good job strategy, what they have is they have I'm hearing some things in the background. These companies have tremendous discipline on their value proposition to their customers. So they ask themselves, why do we exist in the eyes of our customers? Why is it that our customers choose us as opposed to some other company? And once that they clarify that value proposition, then they simplify operationally. So if you go to a Mercadona store, if you go to a typical retailer, you might find 40,000 different products. If you go to a Mercadona store in Spain, you'll find 8,000 products. What does that mean to have fewer products? That means that Mercadona's employees are now more productive. They can shop faster. They can check people out faster. Mercadona offers everyday low prices. What does that mean? Employees are not constantly changing the price tags on the shelves, but they are more productive and they have more time to be able to spend with the customer and to be knowledgeable about the products and services that they offer. So when a company simplifies to increase productivity, now they can pay their employees more. When they pay their employees more, now they can have lower turnover. When they have lower turnover, now they can execute much better operationally. So focus and simplify is one of the important choices of the good job strategy. The second one is what I call the killer product design, which is the combination of standardization and empowerment. So in a typical context where employee turnover is high, the tendency is to put in so many controls and to remove decision-making as much as possible from the stores. There are so many rules about everything. You always have to ask your supervisor if you need to make certain decisions for your customers. Good job strategy environment for companies like Costco, for Trader Joe's, for Mercadona, they do a ton of standards. So they standardize all the things that make sense for standardization so that they increase productivity. But at the same time, they involve their employees in creating those standards. They empower their employees to solve problems for their customers. They empower their employees to manage flow. At the checkout, if you see a long line of customers, you go really fast. If you see that, there are fewer customers, you can go slower, you can talk to the customer, you can ask them if they found anything. So that type of empowerment, again, increases the contribution of the workers and makes their job a much better job. And now you can pay them more and you can invest in them more. The third choice among these companies is cross-train. Again, if you go to, when I looked at the more typical companies, they tend to have either people who are specialized in a specific task. So I'm a cashier. The only thing that I do is to operate the cash register. There's nothing that I do. So when there are customers, I'm working. When there are no customers, I have nothing to do. Or sometimes you ask people to do so many things that they don't have enough time. But the good jobs companies, what they do is they cross-train their workers in order to be able to react to changes in customer demand. So they cross-train their workers to do both customer-facing tasks and non-customer-facing tasks so that workers can change what they do depending on customer traffic. This, of course, enables them to be productive. And again, high productivity enables the company to pay their employees more. And of course, being able to react to your customers improves the customer service and set people up for success. So that's the third choice. The final one is operate with Slack. And this is about staffing the stores with more hours of labor than what you expect the workload to be. So if you expect that the workload, on Monday, I'm going to have 100 hours of work at the store, well, I'm going to staff it 110 hours of labor. What does that do? That means that when there are more customers, Now employees have time to be able to serve them. When you operate with Slack, you do a good job. You don't make mistakes. You don't have misplaced products. You don't have data accuracy problems. You don't have shrink problems. When you operate with Slack, you are able to understand what customers want. You are able to engage in continuous improvement. So tremendous benefits from operating with Slack. But of course, you can't operate with Slack if you have slackers. So these companies use these for operational choices, but also investment in people to have high expectation. And the outcomes of this system is low turnover, a motivated and capable workforce, strong operational execution and service, and the ultimate goal, right? Customer satisfaction and loyalty and ability to improve and adapt. Now, if you currently don't have this type of system in your organization, don't worry, because our Good Jobs Institute has worked with now dozens of companies, and we have some great examples of how companies were able to adapt the system in their organization to create a lot more value for all of their stakeholders. And this is, you lead this conscious center, Francisco. This is the core of conscious capitalism, right? To be able to create outcomes for your customers, for your employees, and for your investors at the same time. I'll give you one example of a company that did this, and this is Sam's Club. So Sam's Club, prior to 2017, and I'll describe who Sam's Club is. So prior to 2017, Sam's Club, which is Walmart's wholesale club, business, Sam's Club used to be very behind their biggest competitor, Costco, in terms of same-store sales growth, in terms of their customer loyalty. Their stores were really struggling to keep up. There were lots of problems. Sam's Club had a new CEO, and this new CEO came in and said, hey, for us to be able to grow and for us to be able to survive, we really have to create more value for our members. So they asked, with the focus and simplify, they asked, why do we exist in the eyes of our members? Why do they come to us? What is it that gets them to pay a membership fee and stay with us? And what they found out was that what got their members to come to them was great merchandise at low prices, in stocks, and they wanted to have a frictionless experience. They were doing omnichannel. So to be able to create this membership experience, they realized we have to get out of the vicious cycle that we're operating in, because we have to have great operational execution. We have to keep turnover low. So they asked themselves, how do we get out of the vicious cycle, right? We're operating in this vicious cycle of high turnover, poor performance. How do we get out? And the way that they got out of the vicious cycle is exactly the same way that many other companies were able to get out of the vicious cycle. And to be able to get out, they made two sets of changes almost simultaneously. And here we represent them in this slide. So one of the changes is that they look at the work that people do. Once you identify why is it that we exist in the eyes of our customers, you say, okay, how do we reduce the workload? How do we reduce the variability of the workload to be able to improve the value we offer our customers and to be able to improve staffing and turnover? So subtracting that workload as much as possible, and simultaneously, if we don't raise pay, no matter what we do, we're not going to be able to reduce turnover. If we don't offer better schedules, we won't be able to reduce turnover. So how do we take care of our employees' most basic needs, pay, benefits, schedules, career paths, and invest in those as early as possible, as much as possible? Let me give you a sense of the exact types of changes that this company made. So on the investing people part, which is on the right side, their initial pay investments, wage investments, were around $5 to $7 an hour from a basis of $15 an hour. If you were a meat cutter, you used to be paid $15 an hour, and now you're paid $22 an hour. Can you imagine how that pay increase changes someone's life? Can you imagine now they don't have to work 2 jobs? Now they can put food on the table. Now they can take care of their families, and what that does to that person's ability to focus on the job and be able to do a good job. So a huge wage investment. They created stable schedules so that employees knew when their schedules were, and that improved stability in their lives. And they, through cross-training, they were able to reduce the job codes and increase the percentage of their full-time employees quite a bit. So part of that was investing in people. The other one, simultaneous change, was subtracting the workload using the operational choices of the good job strategy as much as possible. So what did they do? One of the big changes that they made was an almost 25% reduction in product variety. So they reduced their product variety by about 25%. And interestingly, once they reduced that, they started getting higher scores from their members on product availability and merchandising. Some of the members would thank them for carrying, the CEO of Sam's Club at the time, John Ferner, gives my students this example of how one time a member came to him and said, "Thank you for carrying this electronic toothbrush. It's great." And Sam's Club had always carried that electronic toothbrush, but no one could find it because it was, the stores were so cluttered. Merchandise wasn't in stock. And they found out that their NPS actually declined 30 points when products were unavailable. So 25% SKU reduction. They reduced their price promotions, and they made sure that more of their items were shelved in pallets to increase productivity. They eliminated their overnight shift, which I won't get into detail right now. And they had some very smart technology integration. They created some apps to make the work so much easier, more productive for their workers, and they enabled them to serve their customers so much better. And when you look at, what the outcomes of these investments and these changes have been at Sam's Club, on the store team engagement, huge increases, right? Their hourly turnover decreased by 25%. Their manager turnover, frontline manager turnover decreased even more, 29%. Their full-time mix, the percentage of employees who are full-timers, increased 13%. Previously, it used to be very difficult for them to fill in manager positions. Oftentimes, managers would quit and there was nobody else to replace them. But that decreased by 50%, and more, metrics that show better team engagement. On the performance side, one of the things is they raised pay and they reduced prices at the same time. They raised pay and they reduced prices. Their member net promoter score increased 7%. Their operational efficiency increased by 20%. Labor productivity increased, net sales increased, and the company is so much stronger now, and is in a position where they can win with their customers. They can adapt to changes. During COVID, so many retailers had trouble keeping their stores open because they couldn't find enough people. Sam's Club did not have that problem because they had made these investments. So I'm going to pause here first and see if you have any questions.
I will maybe just have a question that comes to mind, and maybe here there we have represented big companies that have lots of stores, big chains, and I assume they have that question as well, but maybe they're a little bit shy to say it, which is Sam's has stores in Latin America and Mexico. No? In your experience working with them, do they make a difference in their operations and in this type of tactics and strategies, implementing them depending on the country? I suppose they do. And what's your experience around that? No, since we're going to be focusing mainly in our cohort with companies with stores in Mexico and maybe South America, what's your experience with these multinational companies that have operations worldwide implementing this type of strategies?
Yeah, Francisco, to be honest, for Sam's Club in Mexico, I don't know exactly how they made these changes. We focus on their US stores, but what I will say is Costco has stores all over the world, including Mexico. Mercadona is a Spanish retailer. So none of these strategies, the 4 operational choices or investment in people, is specific to a location. They are pretty general. Exactly what levers you use at what time and how much investment you make when, also, of course, depends on the context. And hopefully your, the group of retailers in Mexico that we work with in September, they look at the strategy and they say, how do I adapt it to my company, to my context? We just had a conversation with the CEO of a convenience store chain that is in the United States. But when we talked to him, he said, I don't want to be Quick Trip. Quick Trip is a convenience store chain. He said, I want to be the best version of my company, right? And I want to cut turnover by 50%. Now, he needs to figure out, he and his team need to figure out how they deploy the system to be able to reduce turnover, to be able to make their company a great place to work and to shine in front of their customers.
Great, thank you. I don't know if we have a few minutes, about a little bit less than 15 minutes to finish our session. I don't know if somebody else may have any comment, any questions towards Zainab's presentation, maybe towards the whole cohort in October, or we have some faculty here as well, maybe towards the workshop with the faculty as well.
Yes, and maybe I can give a sense for what to expect in October. So in October, what we'll do is we'll help you clarify, identify the business case for the good job strategy at your organization. And this is, the turnover cost, the operational execution cost, the competitive reasons to do this. And how can you create a system that drives employee engagement, productivity, and high customer service in your context? And then we'll help you identify opportunities for improvement. Again, Francisco, as I mentioned, you won't be Costco, you won't be Trader Joe's, you won't be Mercadona. So how do these 4 choices, investment in people, work? How would they work in your organization? And learn more about Sam's Club and other companies, much smaller companies that was able to adapt the strategy to create great outcomes for all their stakeholders.
Thank you, Zainab.
Great.
I don't know if someone wanted to ask a question or make any comment. Yeah, go ahead, Raul.
Francisco, maybe this is a question for you. What about the workshop for professors? What are the expectations from us? Because I understand that October sessions are going to be focused on some clients of the retail center. So what is expected from us? What is going to happen in the workshop I think it's in June, if I remember correctly? And what is going to be our role in the October sessions?
Yes, and I think that it could be a combined answer. In some way, the conversations that we as a center have had with the Good Jobs Institute is for them to, in some way, empower us with the methodology, with the knowledge, and in some way start co-facilitating the cohort with Good Jobs Institute, specifically because we know that in order to attend and to serve the business leadership, and specifically the retail business in Mexico and Latin America, we would be as tech the ones in some way deploying what we're going to do. So in this first cohort, the idea is certainly for Zainab to lead it with her team, with Sara, with Ridima, but you as the tech faculty also in some way participate in it, and in some way give continuity to what will come afterwards. No, we will continue to be in contact, obviously, future events from the center and the Good Jobs Institute. But the idea is for us to also develop some capabilities as tech faculty. No, but maybe Zainab or Sarah could give more details on that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Francisco. That was a sort of perfect encapsulation of what we've talked about. So we are really excited for the retail cohort in the fall and to bring companies together and teams together to go through this process that Zainab just outlined of digging into their business case and really understanding how good jobs can impact their business today and in the future, digging into the good job strategy framework and getting ideas on the board, and then thinking about how to start that process in their company. And we're really looking forward to the tech faculty on this call and who will be in the faculty session in June, giving us some insights into how this framework applies in your context, and then also being able to support and co-create this cohort with us. So we're really excited for both, and I will say they're both going to be really interactive and fun. So thank you all for your commitment to this, I think, and thank you to Francisco and Raj for their commitment. We have seen such significant impact on workers and on companies and on customers here in the US. And we are really excited to see this applied in Mexico and to elevate your retail jobs and your retailers to be the very best that they can be.
Thank you very much.
Alfonso, I saw you raise your hand. Your question was answered?
Yes, basically, yes. Thank you.
I'm sorry, another question. The October sessions, do you have the exact times? Because we need to program our schedule in advance because of classes and all those things that we have here at Tech.
Yeah, basically it would be a 9 to 5, 9 to 6, both days. Also, basically the whole day, it would be good for you to schedule that. Yeah. Well, maybe we would like a small wrap up. I don't know, Zara, Zainab, if you want to add something else to close this initial session. Once again, I really want to thank you for your time, for your passion. Since we began our conversations, I really see that great passion and interest that you have, and hope to be this platform in which we can really reach out to much more companies and really impact in a positive way our society. So once again, thank you for your dedication, your time. We know that you're in the midst of launching your new book. Maybe you want to just give us the preview on that, and I think that is even much more aligned, talking about the purpose, with what we're doing in the Conscious Enterprise Center.
Yeah, and we're happy to share with you the book too. It's called The Case for Good Jobs, and it's coming out in June. And it is, I describe you the what's maybe all the good job strategy today, but it is on the why and how all the good job strategy. As one concluding thought, I've been teaching at business schools for more than 20 years now. And of course, when you are focused on the business audience, you always think about the financial costs, the competitive costs, and you always make a case for, why this is good for your profitability, why this is good for you to win with your companies. But maybe to wrap the session up, I want to end with the ethical case for doing this. Retail in so many countries is the largest employer. Retail stores are where millions of customers interact with millions of workers every single day. When those interactions are positive, when those interactions are delightful, they bring us together. And when those interactions are not good, they divide us. And being the huge workforce, employer, if a country doesn't have a strong retail job definition, and it doesn't have strong retail jobs, it tends not to have a strong middle class. So you play a huge role in your countries, in your society, to be able to create good jobs for millions of people. And I hope, you know, these sessions will not only get you excited about the impact that you can have on your companies, on your company's success, to be more competitive, to do so much better, but the impact that you can make on the lives of your employees and the society. The companies that were able to adapt a good job strategy during the last few years, we saw that the leaders found that to be extremely meaningful. And they talk about how they've seen employees cry. And they said, you know, we had employees who told us, I could never, no one ever paid me this much. Or I couldn't buy products for my, you know, I couldn't afford buying things for my kids, and now I can. So being a manager is a very noble profession. And I hope you'll find that ethical part inspiring for you and your business as well.
Well, certainly there couldn't be a better way to finish up our conversation with that profound purpose. We do believe, and one of the retail companies that has been involved in this conversation has the capacity of basically the whole Mexican population, in number, obviously, go through their stores every week. So that's the impact, no, that we have certainly in our community. So thank you very much, Zainab, Sara, Redeema, for making this happen, and hopefully this will be warming up things for our workshop with faculty, and then our cohort with our business leaders. Thank you very much for everybody for being here, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.